man. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Joe.
Thank you for taking a minute out today. And before we get into your latest work, I want to know, how did you survive COVID? It was quite a time for all of us to get through. How did you get through it? And how good does this new release feel?
Um, during that point, I had a trio as well as our big band, but the big band kind of took some time off. And a lot of stuff I just did here locally at my home studio, and I just sent things there. In fact, with my five-piece group, the saxophone player was able to, and this wasn't via Zoom because there's a delay.
Yeah.
And so we put some songs together and did some crazy stuff, which was hilarious. Everybody had a click and a work track, and they did their part. And he just tried to do that, and we just had fun doing that. But it was pretty not a lot of gigs out in town or whatever. Everybody's kind of like afraid to see each other.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me about this project. How did it come together? How did the project come together? And with the world opening up, it has to feel relieving to have new material out.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I've been part of this Glendale City College group on Tuesday nights that was a class, and they would also bring in some pro players, and it was kind of half and half of students. And the students got to get the idea and see what it's all about by watching the pros do it too. And they would, they'd share a lot, and it was kind of good. And then after a couple of years, I don't know, it was right before COVID, then the school decided to go a different direction. And then everybody was saying, well, goodbye, whatever. And I said, no, man, we got to start the band and just keep the band going. And I said, let's just do it at our house or whatever. And I did one here, but Craig Kupka, my friend, who is the director he was the director of that band. He was the teacher at Glendale. And he has a double car garage that he fixed into his home studio. And he said, let's just do it there. And we did it casually. And through the years, even back in Glendale City College, I was always writing something every 6 months or so. And through the years, he said, you got 9 songs. And they were always one of the best that the band does, or the ones that people like to hear. And so he says, why don't we record those just for your own documentation? Because I originally wanted just to have a version of them just for my own self. Mm-hmm. And then as I was mixing it, and I'm saying, well, this is sounding pretty good. And I said, and then they said, well, why don't you just put it out there to see what it could do? And somebody told me about Kate Smith or whatever. And I just, I'm just putting it out there, and it does something great. If not, it doesn't matter. I just wanted something so later on years, if somebody wants to hear something and you say, oh, I used to write big band music, they'll say, well, let me hear something. And if you have nothing to play, so I decided just to go ahead and go for it. And it turned out pretty good. And I'm getting good response.
So you've had quite a run in this world of music, from the Mancini show to the Tonight Show. There's so many things that go into it. So let's get to the big bang moment for you, the Alpha. Where were you born and raised? How did these seeds get in you to love not only music, but jazz?
Well, I was born and raised in Burbank. My dad was a bass player and music teacher in a couple of schools locally. He played with Peggy Lee, and he was on the original first live TV band with the Ralph Edwards, before Johnny Carson, before Jack Barr, and all that. And he was on live TV every night, his little trio backing up live TV, and wore the pancake makeup with the bright lights back in the 40s. And so then he would take my mom out to dinner in Hollywood after that, and she would say at the restaurant, he goes, Hal, we'll go watch your face. And it was kind of funny. So my brothers and everybody in my family learned piano at an early age, plus another instrument, and I picked up trumpet. And so then through the years, we had a family band when I was 14, and I was the oldest and the leader. And we played for the Rowan Martins, all their parties, and we were on Laugh-In because we played beautiful downtown Burbank every weekend. And so from there, it went into high school, where I wrote, and I won Jazz Composer of the state of California 2 years in a row, and did a lot of writing there, and got asked to do an arrangement for Mancini when I was 17 of the Baby Elephant Walk, and for a concert band. And there was none available, so I stayed up all night and wrote one out, whatever, and they used it on his TV special. And then my name got around locally, And so if somebody had back in the 60s a single hit wonder with on guitar, they would say, can you use our band, Doc Severinsen band, or it was a Tommy Newsom band at the time. And so they said, yeah, but I don't have an arrangement. So they would always seem to find me. So I used to do some arrangements for that. Plus my piano player and trumpet teacher were like one of the heaviest guys. In fact, Jimmy Rolls, the piano player, is one who played piano on Moon River. And Gren was a trumpet teacher who played in his band as well. So I got to meet and learn a lot of people in the studios. So then, so that was at Monterey when I won Jazz Composer, and I went there as the first all-star band on lead trumpet. And I wrote an arrangement with the McMinnville choir that came down from Oregon. And I wrote a piece while we were up there and woke them all up at 8 o'clock Sunday morning to rehearse and conducted it that afternoon. That was really good.
So it's safe,
and different things too.
but it's safe to say that this has been kind of a part of your life and your DNA. You've grown up with it. You don't know any different.
Exactly. I mean, I started off piano at 5 and trumpet at 7, and then in high school I played trumpet with the original Toto band, and that was with the Picaro brothers and Dave Page and all them. And they went to Grant High School nearby, so we played up and down Ventura Boulevard as a great horn band. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And we were all 17, 18, and then I got them to do a demo album here at my house, or my parents' house at the time, and for these Japanese mother and daughter singing team. And then and it was an amazing demo album, as you can imagine. And so we went to Japan. I lived out there for 6 months and became like an accompanist arranger for a TV show every night. And they offered me a contract for 10 years when I was like 19.
Wow.
And I said, well, I don't even know what I want to do next week. So I didn't do that. I came back and then just kept going from there.
Do you ever think that you wish you would have taken that gig for 10 years?
It would have been great. It would have been a lot easier than what I ended up doing in my 20s, which was take a band on the road all the way back to the East Coast and back in Kansas City. Isn't that where you're at?
Yeah, Kansas City.
Yeah. So anyway, when I was at Busch Gardens here in LA, and I became the arranger for that with a producer, drummer, who was hired by another company. Well, he was from Kansas City, and Curtis Pickering, and with VPR, Video Public Relations, whatever. And he's had that for 40 years or whatever by now. And so he got the band to play all over the country, and I ended up settling in Kansas City for a year because the union was still on strike. So I was doing a couple TV shows at Universal, and they were on strike, so that wasn't happening. And so he says, well, come out to Kansas City. I'll get you some things. We'll write a show for Crown Center and different places and put that band together. And we played all over Westport and the Plaza and stuff.
Okay.
I went back there a second time and did even more stuff. And we wrote a rock opera together when I went out there and had it recorded live and performed 3 nights in a row, sold out at the Uptown Theater.
Okay.
And that was like in the early 80s. And I had a daughter who was born there from Truman Medical Center. So Kansas City was really like my second home.
Wow. Yeah, you're throwing terms out. People will say they're from Kansas City, but when you start saying things like you're saying, you got on the inner guts. You've been inside.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I was like all over the place. I was like, I had a lot of energy back then.
Did you like it here?
Oh, I loved it. In fact, I just came back from there a month ago.
Okay, well, okay.
With my old band Loopy. I don't know if you ever heard the band
Yeah.
Loopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started that band, and I played there in the late 70s, early 80s. And then I bought a big music computer, the Fairlight computer musical instrument. And I was the only one that could actually, in LA, that not only had one that could actually sight read music too. So I did a lot of TV shows with it and with a live orchestra, 80-piece orchestra for Disney's Sunday night movie theme, when they used all the Michael Jackson video stuff that was cut in. And then I also was on Fame every week. They had Fairlight would do all the dance percussion stuff. And I played acoustic piano with a live orchestra. and the string players who questioned me at first, but I end up tapping their bows because they appreciate somebody who can actually read. And so that was, and I bought that in Kansas City originally.
Yeah.
And so I eventually came out here with that and did a lot of shows and a lot of, then I ended up playing keyboards for Knight Rider, Airwolf, and things like that.
The great thing, you know, every place has their vibe. You know, New York's the cauldron, that's the epicenter. You know, Kansas
Right.
City, New Orleans, all these other towns have their history and tapestry. But being out in Burbank and LA, I mean, you have the chance to really get exposure. I mean, when you're dealing with TV and film and having that high level,
Right.
what has that meant for you over the years to be in that environment, to have that access to such a mass audience for your work?
Well, it's kind of bittersweet because originally I was so encouraged, and in fact, in college, I even wrote a symphony that was I wanted to conduct, but they wouldn't let me do that. And so I wanted to go like to Eastman, where Chuck Mangione was, becoming famous, and I wanted to go back to New York somewhere and get my, feelers out there. But my folks said, "Why? You're in LA. Why don't you do what you can do out here?" And so I pushed that further, and I became the student for with Hugo Montenegro for years, and then I was studying timing composition with Earl Hagen, who did all the Sheldon Leonard production stuff, like Andy and Mayberry and Mod Squad and stuff. And in that class was Quincy Jones and all these other Tommy Newsom and whatever. So it was like I got to take individual lessons privately or semi-privately, locally, which I couldn't have done anywhere else, instead of going to a university and getting in a class. So
Yeah.
I thought that kind of helped, but there was still nothing then being able to try something and hear it performed live, which I
Yeah.
was able to do with some great people out here, including like the Clayton brothers, which I was friends with John and Jeff Clayton in college, and we were in a couple of bands together, and just to hear everything performed, and I would write for them, and then get to hear that and have those things performed. So that really helped being in Burbank to do stuff like that.
So, you know, you've obviously been at this game for a long time. What has been the key to your longevity? What do you love the most about this?
Um, well, I've always had to adjust and whatever, and in fact, when I was back in the 90s or in 2000s, um, some things were tight. I was still writing for Lassie and doing other projects, not making a killing, but surviving. But then I got an offer to do like music editing and sound stuff for a company that had a big contract, and they wanted someone like me to look it over. And that was like a steady thing, but I could do that on the side. So it really helped to be able to wear multiple hats and not just be strictly one thing.
So, what is it that you like the best about being a professional musician?
Um, well, I would say when I was younger, I enjoyed the performing side of it. But when you get older, you get tired of all that running around, especially when you have keyboards to back up and amps and all that. And nowadays, you're worse than a drummer, with the type of, at least back in the synthesizer days, you were. But as far as professional musician, I like now that I'm able to sit in a program like Sibelius, which computers weren't even around then or whatever, and be able to play something and hear a bad tone version of it, but you can kind of get the idea, and be able to copy and paste, like a thing. If you want to change the key in the middle of the song, you can copy and paste the first half, put in the second half, and just by one button change the key. Where the old days, you'd have to do everything by hand. And used to spend more time copying out my parts than writing. And so nowadays it's so much easier because you can be more creative and not have to be so physical on it.
Yeah, for sure. So, why do you love jazz?
Um, because I started early enough, and then even though you're playing different other styles when you're younger, um, there was always some jazz elements and songs you liked. But then as time went on, you had more freedom in that than you did just playing rock and roll or anything else, which usually was the same every time you played it. And so I always left enough openness in my charts that you can have a beginning and ending together, and then you open up and create in the middle, and you allow like your better players and friends to have their moment too. So I think it's just a fun, but but what I did on this album is I found a collection of songs I feel, because I don't really think it's a wise idea for a lot of jazz musicians to, they do what they want to do, and if the audience likes it or not, that's great or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's like sometimes I feel like they're more or less doing it for themselves and their own enjoyment. But I try to find songs of different styles and tunes that people have heard before, or my originals, where it's kind of easier to follow or listen to. And then you push the boundaries a little bit, and then they say, "Oh, I get it. I like that," or whatever. Because like the whole idea is to get an audience, or to get more people into appreciating jazz. And so I always felt like it was important to do certain songs and things or arrangements that were either curious, like my combination I did of Waltz for Debbie with the folk song of Billy Boy, the old child doing, and I put them both together, and then I overlapped them and everything. And some people who don't know music well, they would say, "Oh, I love how you did that, and you brought in some of that, whatever." And they hear things like that, and then they kind of get the idea of arranging. So I think it's important that in the world of jazz that you get it to where people can appreciate it, not just pro musicians, but anybody off the streets.
So, Michael, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but you ultimately lead the march. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, that's a crazy question. I think because I was the oldest of the whole family band, and everybody that went on to play at one point of their life, that they always saw me as the leader, because I've been the leader of every band since I was 14. And after so many years of it, that's why I joined this big band, because it was held down by the director was the teacher at Glendale College. And they said, "We have a piano here, so you don't have to move anything. And it's only 4 miles away," and all that. And I said, "Sold, I'll do it." Because it was just made it so easy to go there and just keep your brain active and sight read music every week. So I like that, because I spent my whole life and career just always coming up with an idea of a band or a situation or an arrangement or a movie score to do everything. And I would end up doing most of it with help from others, of course. But I just felt like it was always to be the one to instigate a project or music or whatever. Because a lot of times it's nothing more magical than just doing it. It's like people want to have something to follow or to have a challenge to do. And if you give them something original and you say, "Here, try this," everybody's like, "Can do that." But you got to come up with something that's kind of exciting and fun, which everybody on this album donated all their time because they were really into it.
So if anyone wants to pick up the new album, learn more about you, live shows, anything pertaining to your world, where can they go?
Probably like on Spotify or all the streaming services. They've got everything there. If you want to learn more about me, even go to my website, traxbywax.com. Is being revamped with this project and everything. But it's got my bio. So.
Cool. Michael, this has been great, man. Great Kansas City connection. Great career in music. Thank you for opening up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I had to freeze a lot of barbecue and bring it home.
Yeah, I bet.